it would mean it'd be 3. So essentially, then if you look at this idea of the Trinity with it, 33rd degree Masons the number 33 that goes around. Obviously, if you turn that into the Trinity and you divide 33 by 3, you get 11.
That's interesting.
So you start like seeing these 11s, as I'm saying. So then you move on to recent events, and you get to September the 11th, 2001, right? And you realise that the building was stood like an 11. The 2 towers stood like an 11.
Indeed.
And then you've got 9/11, which is 9 plus 1 plus 1, which is 11. And then you realise that September the 11th was 111 days until the end of the year. And then you start thinking about the first plane that hit the World Trade Center, and it was Flight 11.
There you go, yeah.
Right, and the total number of crew on Flight 11 was 11. And then you look into it further, and the New York State was the 11th state of the U.S. Constitution. Right, and so then you start thinking about where September the 11th stands in year, as far as years are concerned. And September the 11th, 2001 stands 11 years from 2012.
Yeah.
Right. And there's an author called Jose Arguelles. He wrote that from 1992 to 2012 would be in a period of May and no time, the time of no time, which was a transition of the ages kind of period in which, basically world disasters and tension would be on the up and rise constantly. And this period of no time was 1992 to 2012. And so 9/11 in September the 11th, 2001 was 9 years from the start of no time, 11 years till the end of no time. So synchronistically, it was placed bang on where it should have been. And so then you start thinking about, was 9/11 an event that was either was it as Jose Arguelles would put it, was it an inevitable event? Inevitable event. Was it designed by the universe for it to happen as it did?
Yeah.
You look into it further, and World Trade Center commenced building in 1966 and finished building it in 1977. So it took 11 years to create as well.
Yeah.
So you can move on from that, forget all that for the time being, and then you can get to September the 11th in history. And on September the 11th, 1990, at 9:09 p.m., that's 11 years prior to 9/11, George Bush Sr. made his very first speech entitled "Towards a New World Order" in the UN, at the UN. So this was 11 years prior. And then if you take that back 60 years, so you go back to September the 11th, 1941, you'll realise that 60 years to 9/11, that was when the soil was broken for the Pentagon.
Pentagon, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And so you've got this date, September the 11th, again running through this kind of, the nasty war machine of America, if you want to call it that.
Exactly.
And so then basically there's something that happened much further back in time than that, and there's a book written in 1981, and it was called The Birth of Christ Recalculated, and it was written by a guy called Ernest L. Martin, and he claims to have calculated the exact date of Jesus Christ's birthday based on celestial charts for that era.
Yeah.
Basically, he's worked out with the famous Star of Bethlehem, which was, he worked out that essentially Jesus Christ was born on September the 11th, 3 BC. And this book was released in 1981. So, we've got another date there.
And I think that is, sorry to interrupt there, but I think that's actually a key area to why we potentially are seeing so many things oriented around the 9 and the 11 September.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, when it comes into other significant events, for instance, when you think about America and NASA and stuff, the very first shuttle that got to the moon was Apollo 11.
Yeah, there you go.
And then, for instance, in Great Britain, I'm sure I think it's celebrated around the world actually, but on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, we celebrate Remembrance Day, in which we honour our war dead, but it's on an 11/11, and it's basically the Queen and a load of other people taking poppies to a cenotaph, which is an obelisk essentially.
Yeah.
So little strange events going on all over the place.
Indeed.
I mean, talking about the Queen moving into royalty, and this is where I'll lead much deeper into royalty later on. But basically, if you look into the history of the word crown and the royal crown, the word crown was derived from Anglo-French word called couronne, which is derived from Latin for corona, but the year that the word crown, was first established was in the year 1111.
Huh, really? That's interesting.
Right.
Huh,
So,
wow.
I mean, you can't just say that these are coincidences. All of these things that are kind of like connected up, and I get to a point where, at first I thought there were coincidences, but then you think,
Yeah.
what is this thing called chance?
Yeah.
What is it?
Indeed.
So anyhow, that's the groundwork for 11. And then this is where I'd started seeing this time code 1111 on clocks and stuff, and this is when I started getting this flood of information. I don't know where I've been receiving it from, but I've been receiving it from somewhere recently. I don't know what it's all about, to be honest. But basically, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say it's interesting, and to some extent, I think that this is in a way information that wants to get out. I think it's kind of a self-containing awareness within itself, meaning that it is trying to reach out and teach us how things are interconnected. And I think that numerology and so-called coincidence or meaningful coincidence, synchronicity, is a perfect way to demonstrate to us that everything is interconnected. And I think that there are so many levels to all of this. So what we're beginning to discover are some of the most, in a way, actually obvious and very clear signs of this. But I would imagine that this is something that actually runs throughout exactly everything. If you have, basically the amount of time to study something or look at it in close enough detail.
Exactly, I mean, the thing with all the 11s for me is essentially, I come from the viewpoint, I believe in a mind before matter universe.
Yeah.
Everything stems from consciousness. Consciousness precipitates matter, not the other way around, as scientists would have you believe it.
Yeah.
And I mean, the way that I can, kind of prove that to myself and hopefully to others is that, I don't mean to be crude about this, but when, for instance, a man is sleeping and he has an orgasm in the middle of the night, right, the process that has created that is not any physical action. It's all stemmed from thought.
Yeah.
And so if you think about that, then obviously that thought has then created the ability to create life.
That's
right.
If
you understand where I'm coming from.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Exactly. It's a very good point.
That for me is the proof that everything is a mind before matter universe. You can create life with thought.
Yeah.
And, so that means that everything that you're looking at essentially is consciousness. And that's my way of that's where I come from with a lot of this. And given the 11s, connected with the Pentagon and connected with the 9/11 World Trade Center disaster and everything, that to me is indicative of someone else trying to hijack consciousness. I don't know what it is, but for me, there seems to be some kind of other side of things that are hijacking this number for themselves. And I'll obviously lead into that in a bit.
Yeah.
But basically, moving into the Olympics work, obviously, it's been bandied around the internet quite a bit, but if you shuffle the Olympics 2012 logo around, you can spell the word Zion.
Indeed.
And, there's a lot of stigma against the word, and, for no reason whatsoever. But obviously Zion stands for the term New Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And this got me, having seen the Ian Crane speech and everything, this got me doing I had an urge to start my own research into this. I wanted to find out if what was saying could be proven, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, first thing that brought to my mind was the poem by William Blake. And William Blake wrote a poem in the 18th century called Jerusalem. And there's a paragraph, the final few words in that poem says, "I will not cease from mental flight, nor shall my sword sleep in my hand, till we have built Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land." So basically, William Blake was a known 18th century esotericist with connections to the Freemasons. And, he was famous for such pieces of artwork as Urizen the Creator, which is a big picture of the Creator with a compass opened up like a pyramid. Just like, Freemasonic symbology and stuff.
Didn't he reference the Newton in regards to that painting? Have you heard about that?
There is the Newton painting as well, and Newton is kind of lurched over on the floor with his compass. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
That's a different painting of William Blake.
It is, okay, yeah.
But essentially in that poem, we'd got an acknowledgement from a guy connected with esoteric research that they were intent on building Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. And so, we're thinking, like, when we talk about the Olympics 2012, we're talking about something that's been planned for hundreds of years, and there's a lot of proof that I've dug up that can show that. But basically, moving into the Olympics even further, after this talk, and when I got back from this talk in July last year, the first thing that happened was there was a video released by the Olympic Committee, and this was a stadium design video, and it was a crazy CGI, I don't know what you want to call it, action film on how they're going to build the Olympic 2012 stadium. And given what Ian had spoke about with aliens and Independence Day style spaceships and stuff, this has got it all in it. Basically, within 40 seconds of this video, there's 4 chimneys that stand like an 1111, but then it moves into the most significant symbology you could ever see, with, like, you know, an Independence Day style mothership for a roof, little UFOs flying all around the London Eye, and then it ends up with robotic streetwalkers in the middle of London stomping around the place, all like towards the Olympic Stadium. I mean, it's pretty weird to watch it, and it's on my blog and it's on YouTube as well. If you just do a search for the stadium design video, you can see for yourself that there's definitely symbology in there, like, you know, whether you like it or not. So this got me thinking. I was like, where does this go? Does this mean that there is a significant event looming for the Olympics? And I started thinking to myself, well, you know, if they're about to do this now, they've done this before. You know, they've used the Olympics for such events before. Which led me into looking into 1972 Olympics in Munich. Now, funnily enough, these were the world's first stage for global terrorism. You know, the very first global, like, you know, declared as global terrorism. The first act was in the 1972 Munich Olympics.
Indeed,
And these Olympics, there were 11 Israelis killed. So we've got the number 11 there. And they were killed by a group called Black September, which is obviously the 9th month. So it's obviously a 9/11 you've got there. And that particular Olympics were host to 121 countries, which is 11 times 11. So you've got a significant event there with first, like, global stage for terrorism, as it is. And then, you know, moving on, I started thinking, well, you know, the year 1984, there's obviously Olympics in that year. And it's synonymous with the George Orwell book of Big Brother and, you know, a completely, you know, oppressive state, if you like, a New World Order kind of background. And I'd briefly remembered hearing things about a closing ceremony in the 1984 Olympics, and did some rooting around on the internet, and obviously came across a video in the 1984 Olympics, which were held in Los Angeles. They closed the ceremony, and the audience didn't even expect this, because most of the audience thought it was real at the time. It closed with a UFO flying over the Olympic Stadium, kind of communicating with the audience in a Close Encounters of the Third Kind style.
Right.
And the UFO eventually, like, closes down and lands in the centre of the stadium, at which point there's a load of smoke, and then this alien gets out and tells the audience that he likes what he sees there. So you got this really strange thing out of the middle of nowhere. No one was expecting it, and I don't know how you'd ever connect Olympics with this UFO event in the first place. But basically, obviously, 1984, symbolic year, UFO landing. So you start thinking, stuff going on, not sure what, I can't really put my finger on things. And at this point, I'd decided to move away from the Olympics for a bit, because I felt that, you know, I wasn't going to find much more for the time being. And it got me involved in looking at symbols of sorts, and general symbolism and corporate logos. And I started off with, obviously, the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill. And if you notice with the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill, on the particular side that it's on, it's the only note that it appears on in America, and there's 4 ones on it, and they ring out 1111 either side of the dollar bill.
Indeed,
You got the same thing again. I was looking at that, and basically started comparing it to other, you know, American institutions, looking it through, you know, the FBI logo, the CIA logo, every single one of them. You can essentially kind of draw out the pyramid without the capstone, and have an eye in the centre. You know, the same geometrics work in a lot of the, you know, the official, like, institutions of America. And I wanted to get to the source of where this was, and everyone, like, you know, generally a misinterpretation is that America was the foundation of all of this. You know, in 1776, and, you know, I mean, for a while